I started listening to music when I was about 5 years old. On my own, that's when I decided I wanted to listen to records. And I had a down-set record player with 7 inches. My parents owned a cafe by a station in Wickford in Essex, and the guy used to come around to change all the 7 inches out of the jukebox and would give me the previous week's old records. So I'd sit at home, and instead of playing with dolls, I'd play with records. I never really thought about a career in music. I went to an all-girls convent boarding school. Um, it was just never in my thoughts about how music was made or production. I learned classical piano, folk guitar, but never really wanted to perform. It was nothing that I thought about. And at 16, I had a close friend of mine was a housekeeper at the Manor in Oxford, which was a residential studio owned by Richard. This was in the 80s. Bands like Queen and Rush were recording down there. I mean, beautiful studio, beautiful grounds. So I'd go down there for the weekend and hang out and get drunk and go swimming in the pool and play snooker and just, be a teenager really down there, living it large really. So one weekend I went down there, the studio was empty, there wasn't a band in there, and the assistant engineer took me in to look around. So 16, walked into this incredible recording studio and just had this sort of euphoric moment of like, oh my God, what is that? How? I asked him ridiculous questions. How do you do it? Wanted to know everything. So came back to London and started to look at courses. Now back then we had 3 courses. We had Surrey University, the course at Guildford, a place called Gateway, which was South London. I was living central east, between central and east at the time. And School of Audio had just opened there in North London. They were near Holloway. So I went to SAE, did a course, came out of there, assisted in recording studio. I mean, was so excited. I mean, couldn't get enough information, to be honest with you. Proper geek girl. Loved every minute of, every day. It was there 24/7 as much as I could be. So, looked around, worked in some recording studios around London, and then the Exchange advertised in Music Week for trainee mastering engineers. So I called them up and they were like, the close for CVs meeting is tomorrow. This was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I don't really know what planet I was on. I hand wrote a CV, because of course this was pre-computer times. Hand wrote a CV with spelling mistakes that I scribbled out. I mean, proper, like punk rock letter. Drove up there, put it through the letterbox. Got a phone call to come along for the interview. Well, it was only years later that Graham and the girls there told me that I was the joke interview. They couldn't believe that somebody had the audacity to put this letter through with spelling mistakes, handwritten on a bit of paper, CV. So I went along for the interview and met John Dent and Graham Darren. They were partners then. They kept me waiting about 2 hours for the interview. So of course by the time I was in there, and anyone that knows me will understand that, my blood was boiling. I was so fired up that I think they couldn't not take me on. It was, I was so assertive in the interview. Blonde, spiky hair, loads of makeup. I think they were looking for one of the assistants to be a female. It was in the 80s. There was a lot of initiative about women coming into men's businesses, a bit like what we have going on now. At the moment we've got a big initiative going on about getting more females into the music business and raising that profile. So it started at the Exchange. My first teacher was Ray Staff, which was just heaven. I mean, incredible teacher to have. Anyone that's studied mastering under him is probably the luckiest mastering engineer going. So Ray Staff was my first teacher, and then John Dent, and then Graham. So 3 very seminal mastering engineers to learn lots of tricks from. So I worked there for probably about 3.5, 4 years, then went to America, lived in New Orleans, got married, had my son. Went into some of the studios, like Alan Tucson offered me a job at C-Saint. I got offered a job up at Sterling Sound, but didn't really want to move to New York. Didn't really know what Sterling Sound was then. It was probably a bad move. I probably should have gone, thinking about it, but it wasn't in my thing. I wanted to be in New Orleans, listening to blues and jazz and hanging out in bars and enjoying life. So after I gave birth to Joplin, we moved back to England. Joplin was probably about 8 months, and just put the feelers out. Was just looking for part-time work, to be honest with you. Went up to Exchange, went and saw Ray, and just said, if you need holiday cover, let me know. About 2 weeks later, the Exchange called me up and said, do you want your job back? So I walked back in there, and then worked there till I think maybe about 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago, and then left. Was about to set up. I mean, there was always a studio space here, and I was going to go freelance at that point, but then got approached by Electric to go over there. So went over to Electric, helped Pete build up the studio. Managed to get Guy to move out of the Exchange. The thing for Guy and I at the Exchange, we were the baby engineers, we were the last ones in. So when that happens, you're always the bubba inside a studio complex like that. And Guy and I were doing incredible work, but not really getting the recognition inside the place that we were working for it. So it was a great move. I think it's been a great move for Guy. He's doing some great stuff over there. It was a good move for me. So then we were talking about doing a partnership deal, and that was at the point that I decided it probably wasn't the best way forward. So left there, started concentrating a bit on here. Within, I think about a month of that, got approached by Universal Mastering and started chatting to them about going out to LA and taking over one of their rooms out there. And then changed my mind. Figured that it was probably better to stay this side with my clients over here. So working for a major label, a major conglomerate like Universal, you just don't have the stability of your job. And you just really, when I was going out there meeting the guys that I was going to work with, you really felt that there was this fear. And I'd come from the Exchange, that even though it was a small complex, you always had that fear inside that building. I thought, I don't really want to live with the anxiety of not knowing whether I'm safe in a job. Even though I was going in freelance, it wasn't going to be an employment contract, I would be freelance. It was just anything could happen. Universal could decide to shut down the studios, and then I'd be out of a room and I'd have to set up another room. And it was just thinking about energy. It takes a lot of energy out of you every time you move. And you find some of your bigger clients won't move with you because they want you to learn your new room. It takes a couple of years for you really to get into your room and be in control of it. So it was to go through that again. I'd already left the Exchange and had to go through it with Electric, and then leaving Electric. It was like, okay, if I go out there, I'll do it again, and it's a much bigger move going into the American market. And then if it does go wrong, I'm going to have to move everything back here, thinking about if I moved out there, moving my dog out there, for instance, and then if I did have to come back, her going into quarantine for 6 months was, I wouldn't be able to leave her out there. I wouldn't want to leave her here. Joplin, my son, what that would do to him, how he felt about it. So even though I was looking at houses out there and was very excited about it, there was a lot going through my head. But I think it was just the fear of them, shutting the studio down. So when I pulled out of the negotiations, I actually shut down New York, Vlado's room in New York. They'd shut down South America, like within a month of me pulling out. So it was a bit of a sign of, maybe it was the best thing not to do. And to be honest with you, it has been for me. I mean, the studio here has gone great. It's probably the best thing I've ever done, to be honest with you. I never wanted my own studio and to get into the business side of things, because I am just an engineer. I'm the happiest just being in here, somebody just, telling me what to do, and me just being in there, not thinking about the business side of it. But for me, the best thing is I can just be totally honest with my clients, which when you work for other people, sometimes it's hard for your ethos to come through. You have to take on the ethos of the studio you work for. Because it's mine, it can just be what I want. Getting jobs, it was mainly through friends, knocking on doors. I knocked on a lot of doors. The job for the Exchange, I was living with a singer, Stuart, who really wanted to be famous. I mean, he is famous now, but back then, he wanted to be famous so bad. And he used to buy Music Week every week, and I hated it. I still find it a bit of a hard, magazine to read, paper to read. And one day I was on, this day, I was on the phone to my best friend, and she talks for English. Music Week was there, so I started from the back cover and just was flicking the pages and saw the ad for the Exchange, so that's where that came about. But when I go to the universities now, and we have so many courses, if you think then, when I looked for a course, we had 3 courses that I could find in London for music tech. There really wasn't. And then a couple of years later, I think London University set up a course, but there really wasn't courses for music tech at all. And I really struggled. It took me 3 years to get a paid job coming out of SAE. And that was me, who I was living in central London. I was, going and knocking on doors constantly. I'd work in this studio for a while and then move on. And there really wasn't the work around then. It was really hard to get into. So you figure now we've got over 200 courses of music tech. There is no work out there. We have less studios than we did back then. There was studios everywhere then. It was all analogue when I came into the industry, so there was a lot of studios. It wasn't like people could do stuff at home. There was not really. That wasn't something that came into it. It was tape, vinyl. That was our mediums. So I just lucky really, but a lot of knocking on doors. Everyone that you speak to says that it's luck. It really is luck, and it's how determined you are. And when you do get the opportunities of how willing you are, how much do you want it, because you've got to work hard. If I think I work hard now, back then, you went into a recording studio, it was a lot of hours, not very much sleep, no money, they might buy you a bit of food, but we have a lot more students coming out now than we did back then, and a lot less studios, so, it is quite hard. I think there is sometimes a bit of false hope for these students. If you figure, I'll put an advert up for an intern assistant, and within 24 hours I'll have over 100 applications in 24 hours, all with music tech degrees. And when you look at the CVs, really the CVs are the same throughout. And what I say to them is, what's going to make you different? And they do have an attitude now, I think a little bit different to my generation coming into it. They're a bit complacent. They think they know a lot. They think they're entitled because they've done this degree, and they think they know so much, but they forget it's just some of it, you're going to learn everywhere, but some of it is just the lecturer's interpretation of something. And part of what we do is you need to be open, because there is no one defined way of doing something. We are all different, and they do tend to forget that. And they're not taught really studio etiquette. This is the biggest thing I find. You'll get these guys come in, and or girls, and they really don't know how to be in a studio. They don't understand that they're an assistant, and they need to be quiet. They're just we'll be playing music, and they'll just walk in the door and start asking questions, and forget the etiquette that we were all taught. I was even taught that at university, but it seems they're not really taught that anymore. That there is a studio etiquette. When you do meet engineers, producers that have been around a long time, and you spend time with them, you do understand that they all have that sense of, you know, studio etiquette, and that is one of the most important things.
No doubt.
And yeah, I mean, you know, when you came into it, I know when I came into it, that was my life. You know, I didn't have a personal life. I gave that up to come into this business. You know, it's what do you want more? You know, your personal life comes back a few years down the line when you've done your training. You start to get your personal life back, but at the beginning, it is an all or nothing situation. You need to give 110% really to actually get through. It's there's a lot of competition, and a lot more for them than there was for me. I think when you work with analog, you know, the first thing, it's actually a lot easier on your senses, if that makes sense. You don't have the visual side of it like we do with the computers. You know, you don't have this bright monitor staring in your face all day. So just that side of it on your senses was calmer. The workflow, even though you work very hard, you didn't seem to feel as under as much pressure, because you know you had to line the tape machines up. If you were editing, you know, you did have to take the tape off and cut it. Now everyone expects things so instant, because we're in that world now. Everything's so quick and instant. Back then it took time. You know, to do a 7-inch edit on reel to reel took time. It would take you a day. Whereas now they expect the same thing in an hour. It's, you know, so we're in a, you know, everyone expects things a lot quicker than back then. When you master a track back then, just the fast forwarding and rewinding would give you a break. You know, now you just, you know, press play again. Everything's, you know, like this, so much quicker. You know, you'd cut vinyl, you'd have to set the lathe up, you know, you'd test cut the vinyl, you play it back. You know, now it's just, you know, EQ a track, you know, off it goes, that's it. Even though it would take longer, but it was, in a sense, I suppose, you had more breaks because of it. You know, I find that you don't get as many breaks. You have to make the effort to give yourself breaks when you're working with digital, because it's so quick. You get the files up, off you go. You know, you could just be sitting in here hours and forget to actually give yourself a break, if that makes sense. Where with analog, naturally throughout the day, you were having breaks because of what you were having to do. I don't do everything pure digital, because everything most things, not everything, I can't say everything, most things will come out to analog. The reel-to-reels, I'd probably say, I probably get 20% of the work that I do will come in on reel-to-reels. Of that, how much would be pure analog? Maybe 3-4%, I'd say, of that would be pure analog, where they've recorded it, you know, to tape, mixed it to tape, and it hasn't touched a digital workstation. Most things are digital. I think it was the first week I was there. I can't remember the name of his band, but anyway, I think he was on mute at the time, and he came in, and he was dressed up as a priest, but he wasn't. He had some very strange symbol around his neck, and he came in with his daughter, and I ended up having to babysit his daughter for the day, because she was, you know, very young, probably 3, 4, 5, something like that, but very wild child. And he was just nuts, as you like, very, I suppose, you know, a bit intimidating, you know, like some of them punk rock guys would be, but, you know, me coming from that era, he didn't really intimidate me, and it was quite, he was quite intriguing to me, but he did used to jangle as we walked down the corridor, and, you know, all the guys would talk about all his piercings and things. So this was, you know, my first sort of major memory of a client at the Exchange. You know, it was in my first week, and I was a bit like, wow, this is quite rock and roll, you know. I'm babysitting this kid drawing pictures while assisting on this session. So that was quite a nuts one. I remember Graham bringing Maxi Priest in to do an edit with me. You know, that was quite a milestone. One of the first things that I transferred to vinyl was overseen by Ray, was something for, I think it was for Elton John, you know, so that was quite cool. I used to assist a lot, you know, back then. I mean, it was, you know, you'd work in the copy room, doing transfers, reel-to-reel, bin masters for cassettes, you know, doing all the, you know, sort of tape-to-tape transfers from quarter-inch to half-inch to quarter-inch, you know, production masters. Then you'd sit behind an engineer for a week, and then you'd go into the CD editing, because of course this was pre-sort of computers, so we had a Sony DAE editor, and that's what we do, the editing. So I'd do editing with guys like Smith and Mighty would come in, Prodigy, you know, when they were first starting. You know, all these, you know, guys would come in to do radio edits, because they'd have their 12-minute tracks. So it was like, okay, we need to bring it down to 3.5 minutes. So to do a radio edit, it would take you a day. So, you know, I'll be in there with these guys all day, you know, fast forwarding, rewinding, editing. It was quite nuts, I suppose, for me to, you know, all of them, Basement Jaxx, Chemical Brothers, Fatboy Slim. I mean, all of them, you know, all these seminal people that now we all look up to, they were all beginning then, so it's just been great to watch their careers. For me, Ray had cut things like Led Zeppelin, Hunky Dory, Bowie. Led Zeppelin were my favourite band. The Hunky Dory, the Bowie, I only discovered he cut that a few years ago. I didn't even know, I sat next to him for years. But the records that he'd cut were records that I listened to so much. And I had this very strange thing from quite young with music. You know, I'd like music for music, but then there'd be other things that the sound would really capture me. So Ray was, yeah, like I said, Led Zeppelin, Hunky Dory. I mean, that Hunky Dory on vinyl was just beautiful. I mean, you know, it sounded incredible. And the Led Zeppelin stuff that he cut, Physical Graffiti, I mean, I played that record so much, it's ridiculous. John had cut things like the Bob Marley Legends, again, seminal sounding, Traffic, he did a lot of work with them. Again, records that I played so much. Not just because I loved the music, but I enjoyed listening, you know, the sound of them. Graham had done things like all, you know, the special stuff, and Grace Jones. Now I remember the first time I heard Grace Jones on vinyl, my uncle played it to me. I mean, it blew my head, the sound of this thing. It was incredible. So for me, I couldn't believe when I got there and started chatting to them and realising that so much of my record collection these guys had cut, and so many things that really sonically had made me sort of turn my head, you know. It's like I like the sound of them, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So even though I didn't know their names, because I'd never thought about mastering, yeah, you know, I love their their sound. Somebody's killing my dog. It is a strange industry. In some respects, because it can be quite a boys' club. I don't know whether it really worked in my favour. Lots of people found it a bit strange. I think a lot of it is women aren't really drawn. Why would women be drawn to electronic things? And you know, it's very sciencey. You know, a lot of women aren't really drawn to that electronics and science. I mean, I was geek girl from very young. I think, you know, I don't think it's conditioned into us. I think it's just what attracts us, you know, to be drawn to you know, something that, you know, we're interested in. I was always interested in music. My mum was. My father was. I was, you know, I loved my record player, you know. I loved playing, you know. I loved looking at vinyl. I was a bit of a geek, even very young, 5, 6, 7 years old. So I'm not sure why women aren't drawn to it. You know, it's something that's been coming up a lot, and we've been talking a lot. And I'm not sure, like, you know, it's just, I don't know, you know, why women aren't drawn to it more. Maybe they're just not aware of it. It was never really an issue for me. I mean, the only issue was I would be challenged more back then, technically. than some of the guys that I was working with. I mean, we'd discuss it, how, you know, we'd work with same producers and they'd be asking me really technical questions, but they wouldn't question the guys. And so I did feel that I'd be challenged more. But luckily for me, I was a geek girl. I mean, I used to take all the manuals home. I read every manual inside the exchange building that, you know, there was. They all used to laugh at me at how sick I was, you know, that it wasn't normal to do that. But I just, you know, I needed to know, I needed to understand. I wanted to know everything. I've just been nominated this year for the shortlisting for the MPG Master Engineer Award. And so that's for the Coexist XX and Frightened Rabbit, Progesterone Verse. Two quite big albums, quite nuts to work on, both of them, for different things. Really great, you know, bands, great producers, great engineers, but, you know, very unusual projects for different reasons. I'm not up for a Grammy this year, I don't think. I did have a quick look. I don't think any of the projects I'm working on this year have been up for a Grammy, but I've got quite a few friends of mine that are up, so good luck to them on that. But yeah, I've been nominated for lots of awards. Lots of them I didn't know. When we worked at the Exchange, we didn't really get involved in that. I only found out 5 years ago that the Sigur Rós album that I worked on was nominated for Grammys. I had no idea. No idea. Didn't know really anything about that whole world of Grammys, MPGs, AES. It's just something since leaving the Exchange that I've really discovered and got involved in. Yeah. Last year it was great. Bjork won a Grammy, and it was, you know, that was just brilliant. It's her first Grammy. She's been nominated many times. It was just a great one to win, and great to be part of the team for that. So. But yeah, no, it's great. And the MPGs is great. I think they're in their 5th or 6th year. And so they're doing the same thing as the Grammys, trying to get recognition for more of the engineers and producers. And, you know, we give the first Brit Award to Producer of the Year at the award ceremony. So yeah, it's good. It's good to have recognition. It helps people. It's just really humbling to be appreciated for the work you're doing. I think that's what's nice. That's, you know, when I've been nominated, and it's just so humbling to get that, you know, that pat on the back, really. You're getting a pat on the back from your peers of well done, and that's really, really humbling. Because, you know, your clients get back to you and go, oh, we love what you've done, and, you know, and that's great, but that's just a way of your peer group of going, you know what, well done, you know, you did good. Yeah. Sadie, I think did they bring one in first for a demo? I think they brought one into the Exchange for a demo. We were using Sonic Solutions then, and having a lot of problems with technical support, and it was just time. It was time to upgrade, so we started talking about it and looking at options. And is it Duncan? Was it Duncan, maybe? I can't remember. The guy came down from Sadie and brought a system down. Then it didn't happen then, even though a few of us were shouting for it. Then what happened next? I think I came down and with Karen from the Exchange, we had a demo at Sadie. And then I think we did the jump then, so I think we bought 2 or 3 systems first. And yeah, just ended up putting them into all the rooms, and that was that. But that's quite a few years ago. I was trying to think how many years ago. Must be 12 years ago, 13. I mean, it's quite a while. It's a long time. I think the thing, I suppose, was, you know, with because Sadie came after Sonic. I think Sonic was was around before Sadie was built, if I'm right in saying that. I think I am. So that's why we went the Sonic Solutions route, and then went to Sadie afterwards. Prism goes back so far back. I mean, I remember when Jodie, it was around the time Jodie first started working. And I remember the ADA8 coming into Exchange. I don't know whether it was then or probably a few years later, and all the guys just not being able to get their head round, this incredible converter. They just found it so overwhelming. But I've loved Prism So, well, since I first heard anything through them, I mean, incredible, incredible sounding products. You have to do your homework every, so often people bring new converters down, and I'll compare, and I try and be objective if I can, but I always end up back with prison, and I'll get people around me to do blind tests with me, but for me it always wins hands down, without a doubt. My converter is probably the most important thing. My playback and record system are the most important thing, I suppose, for me. I suppose monitors are important as well, but my attitude with that is you could learn any monitor, if you have enough reference points. We all know great mix engineers, producers will walk into a recording studio and get in control of the room very quick. We can all work around a monitoring system not being great. We can't work around bad conversions. I need to know that when I'm playing back somebody's files, it's as neutral as it can be. It's the best it can be. I have very interesting clients that will bring their projects down on the computer, and they'll bring their converters down, and we'll start playing back on them. That's what they've mixed through, that's the sound they know, but often we'll ditch their conversion and plug, one of my prisms, a lot of the times the Orpheus, because it's easy to manipulate, with the systems. We'll plug the Orpheus in, and all of them sit there and go, wow, the difference for me straight away you hear is the depth and the width, and the separation in sound is quite phenomenal. But they all comment on it. Quite a few of my clients have ended up purchasing, some of this, some of the Orpheuses due to what they hear in it, because it is, incredible. I want to be in control of the colour I introduce, and I want my converter to be as neutral as possible, so that I can introduce the colour that I want, because every project's going to be different, what I need to bring to it. So for me, I want to introduce the colour and decide that, not my conversion decide that for me. Some of them, for me, you plug them in and there'll be a distortion in the mid-range. I don't know what it is, it'll just be this edginess. Now some people, when they hear that, they like that, they're drawn to it because it feels maybe a bit brighter. But if you're with them and you do listening tests with them and you go through it, then they soon understand what you're saying. I have to be careful with some of the producers I work with, because they use stuff, and if they tell me, I can be quite vocal of telling them why I don't like it. And the problem is, once you show somebody and they tune into it, they find it very hard to work with them afterwards. Some of them are a bit sluggish as well. They just sound, I don't know, they'll be like this push in the mid-range, and then they just feel a bit sluggish to me. That that I'm not getting the attack coming through in the sound, the dynamic range, just everything feels held back, a bit compressed. So, and a lot of colour, a lot of them have quite a lot of colour. I always remember when they first wrote Sadie, the whole thing was, it's designed for analogue engineers, and it does bring that mindset when you've grown up with analogue. It does, it's intuitive to that brain. Sonic Solutions wasn't like that. I mean, it was hard, terminology, everything inside it was quite hard to get your head around. You had to learn how to use it. Sadie, you could just open it and probably get going very, very quickly. As an engineer, it's intuitive. You look at some of the other platforms out there, and I know them all, they're not intuitive. You couldn't get started very quickly. I love the new Sadie 6, the fact that I can take it out and about with me when I go to clients. I do some location mastering, so when I do that, it's great to be able to take the tools out like that now. I've quite enjoyed the changeover to it. The colours, I like the new colours. These engineers, they forget that they came into this because they love technology and new things, and what happens again, people become complacent, they get set in their ways, and they forget all that excitement that we all had at the beginning of discovering new things. and they get to a point where they don't like change, but they forget the essence of what we do is about change. Does that make sense? They become complacent, they just want it to be normal, they just want to go to work and push their buttons and everything be easy and normal, and they forget the one thing that encouraged them into it in the beginning was curiosity and being excited about new things. So they need to get back to that ethos. Because I find that with some of the guys that I work with, they can just get stuck in their ways and forget to challenge themselves, and they forget it's a science, and science is about learning new things and discovering that. So one thing I couldn't live without is probably my prisms. If we talk about in analog, my record player, can I say that? I don't know. For me, they're just tools. You see, I have this very funny attitude, and when I talk to my peers, especially my friends in America about it, I'm really under the impression they're all tools. And if you're an engineer, you'll manipulate any piece of kit. That's what we're taught to do. Doesn't matter how good, how bad it is, you will get the best you can out of any piece of kit. So for me, the tools just make my job easier. It doesn't matter what it is. Yes, it's really nice having an EMI transfer console. It's very easy to manipulate. It's quick. It's functioning. It brings a bit of tone, but the tone it brings is nice. It makes my job easier than having maybe, I don't know, something like a Mackie, to go through, or it just makes my job easier. That's all it is. It's just a tool. So, to be honest with you, the thing I couldn't live without is my prisms. It is, the honest thing, because that's part of what I need. That is a tool that I need. I don't think other tools, like other converters, I'd trust in the same way. Analog things, record player.